He brought us out of the darkness and into the light. He brought us out of the darkness and into the light. He has lifted our blindness and He gave us His sight. He brought us out of the darkness and into the light. We sing, oh, 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 oh. We are no longer slaves, we are daughters and sons. We are no longer slaves, we are daughters and sons. And we have entered communion with the Three-in-One. We are no longer slaves, we are daughters and sons. We sing, oh,
Hey guys, Pastor Barry here, and I'm with Pastor Ashton, and we are at Sunrise Bread Company, a place that Ashton spends a lot of time because he's a full-time student, and we are going to celebrate or talk about what does it mean to celebrate communion. So Ashton, walk us through, how do we celebrate something such as death?
Yeah, that's a hard topic to jump into. Jesus says that the bread is representing His body. Romans 6, verse 23, it says, "For the wages of sin is death." That's a tough verse to hear, but Jesus paid that wage that we have as sinners.
Yeah, so what Ashton's saying is Jesus died in our place, right?
That's right.
The bread represents His body. And when Jesus was with the disciples, we see this in Luke chapter 22. When He was with the disciples, it's known as the Last Supper. It's the picture that you've seen before, but it's in that situation where Jesus tells the disciples, this bread represents my body that I'm going to give, that I'm going to die in your place. And we can look all throughout the scriptures, both Old Testament and New Testament, where Jesus is that payment. So church, what I want you to do right now, with your family and with whoever you're with, I want you to take your bread or your element for communion. And I just want you to pray quietly right where you are. If you're with a family or with a group, pray with that group. But let's just pray before we receive this. Knowing that Christ gave His life, how are we reenacting that or celebrating that death and remembering that that death is in our place? So whoever you're with, right now, wherever you are, just like Luke 22 says, that Jesus took the bread, He gave thanks and broke it. Then He says, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me."
Luke chapter 22, verse 20, we see that Jesus starts to talk about the blood of Christ. I don't know about some of you, but when I think of blood, I get a little queasy, I get a little scared, just because it's not a fun subject to talk about. But blood, in this case, it's talking about it being poured out as a price for these wages we see in Romans 6.
Sure. When you think about the death of Jesus or the blood being poured out, you can't think about the death of Christ without the blood of Christ. Think about Jesus sitting at that table just like this with his disciples. When he brought up the idea of a blood sacrifice, everyone in the room knew what he was referring to. Because up until that moment, all sin was paid on the altar by a blood sacrifice. Jesus becomes that sacrifice. The Bible is very, very clear that Jesus is the lamb that was slain so that you and I have life. So how we celebrate communion, why we remember communion, one, Jesus told us to, but two is so that we can reenact and take part in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That blood covering us is what we celebrate. So just like he says in Luke 22, this is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. Jesus poured out his blood covenant so Ashton and Barry and everyone else in humanity could experience life. So church, right now, whoever you're with, wherever you are, go ahead and just get to that place through prayer where you can pray to receive for yourself the covering of Christ. Though this is just juice, this represents so much more than juice today. This represents the blood and sacrifice of Christ Jesus, my Lord. And Ashton, I love Hebrews 12. It says in verse 2, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. And I love that because I can picture myself on the downslope of the hill of the cross. And Jesus says for joy, because as he looked down, he saw my face. He saw you, and he saw you. And he saw all of humanity. And that was the only thing that propelled him through that torture. It brought or carried him through the death. Why? Because he knew his blood would pave the way for salvation for all mankind. So we drink this juice in remembrance of what Christ has done, just like he said. So drink this now, remembering Christ died in our place.
Hey Grove Church, thank you so much for joining us in this. We hope you have a great week. We love you, and we cannot wait to see you soon.